Memo said bin Laden determined to strike. Condi Rice had to put her head down when the commission asked her, what's the name of that memo? And she kind of said, bin Laden determined to strike in the United States. You know, and this was August 6th of 2001, where some of that flood of information was given to Bush. This is another memo. I'm not going to have time to go into it, but where if they had read this memo with the names of FBI directors, assistant directors, it really would have changed everything. You know, you can't say it would have changed everything, but there are at least a half a dozen ways that if intelligence had been shared, that 9/11 quite likely or probably could have been prevented. And if it had been prevented, we never would have found ourselves in the situation of being so traumatized that then we would allow this to be used as a pretext to launch war on Iraq. These are some examples, and I know Ray is going to go into some more of these examples of fixing intelligence for, you know, policy. They have a prior agenda, and so wars are like this, unfortunately. You know, there's been all these cases, the Gulf of Tonkin, and even the sinking of the Lusitania. There's been, throughout history, this desire to justify wars, and even to sustain wars by coming up with these things. And the only thing I want to say here, I maybe can't read it too well, but, you know, it's not working, and in fact, it's even worse than it's not working. The war on terror has increased worldwide terrorism, and there's different ways of looking at this, but counting and everything, but one count has it up 6,000%. So if all of these things were working to address it, and to be honest, I don't think they did fix the sharing intelligence very much. I think they actually went the opposite direction and increased secrecy. There's been an increase in secrecy even since 9/11. So it's not, of course, drone bombing is a great example. We're talking about that because there's an ad that's going to run in Des Moines. And drone bombing, even our generals admit, does not win hearts and minds. Surprisingly enough, it does not win hearts and minds. And even if you are accurate, and you kill the high-level terrorists according to the paper, General McChrystal says you create 10 more enemies. Well, you don't have to be a math genius to see that this is completely counterproductive, and it can't possibly work. There's another kind of overarching fudging of, I guess, rationale more than intelligence, but we're all led to believe that this is a noble goal of bringing democracy and human rights to less fortunate countries that either have, you know, leaders that either we don't like or, and actually in many cases it's not just not liking them. I've told people that, you know, these are not people that I would want to be my friends, like Saddam Hussein or the Taliban leader in Afghanistan, or Gaddafi, or the Ukrainian leader, or I mean, there's a whole list now of what we call dictators and bad leaders. So the theory, Madeleine Albright was the one who came up with this initially. She said, we are the one exceptional, indispensable nation, and we have this responsibility now to, you know, spread democracy. And by spreading democracy, somehow that will then gain stability and peace. So a lot of people think, you know, the ends justify the means. And they think, well, if you have this great goal, then maybe the use of harsh economic sanctions. In the case of Madeleine Albright, they did put harsh economic sanctions on Iraq, and this is, I think, 98, 99, something like that. She's on a television show, and the reporter asks her, you know, about 500,000 children may have died because of these sanctions in Iraq, and Madeleine Albright says, we think it was worth it. Okay, well, what is that? That's basically reflective of a utilitarian ethics. They call it utilitarian ethics, where the ends justify the means. You saw the same thing with torture. Torture was justified by, we'll get the real reliable information, and that will save lives. Not only was it said many times, Dick Cheney is still saying this, and I think Carly Fiorina just said it the other day. But not only is it saying it, but we had television shows and movies. Zero Dark 30, how many people saw Zero Dark 30? A few. That show is complete fiction. They claim that it was made with CIA information from Leon Panetta, but in fact, that I can talk to you afterwards and tell you this is factually completely incorrect on so many levels. And especially the idea that you are achieving a good goal by utilizing a bad method. And this is this idea of bringing democracy. It's the same type of thing. We're killing, now actually millions of people have died, and I can't believe more people don't understand this. Welcome to endless war. Our officials now have said it's going to be a long war. A couple of elections ago, McCain says this is going to be a war to last 100 years. One time they said it'll be a 3-generation war. All different ways of saying perpetual war, there's no end to it. And I was involved in the war on drugs and the, even the war on crime, the war on poverty. When you set up something like this, it means that you can't end it. We're never going to really probably beat all poverty or whatever, so same with terrorism or crime. By the way, some of these tactics, when they create more violence, destabilization and violence, I'm pointing to the drones, when they create, you have a perfect recipe for perpetual war. That is, if this was selling a product and it was a business, it would be great because you're creating a market, you're creating what you are, but this is not what we want. We do not want to have perpetual war. So the answers are to reduce government secrecy, and there's a lot of simple fixes. They aren't what we've been doing, but they're actually very simple solutions if we can get the political will. So if we can get the people in positions to finally really start being truthful and answer some of these things, we can, that's the answer. And, okay, moral high ground. Moral high ground in the law is the fact that you don't have a policeman of the world. You have reciprocity between countries so that if one country violates that law, now the other countries are going to have the same, they're going to be allowed to violate it as well. This notion that the United States, as exceptional, can torture, for instance, and that anybody else who gets our people will torture them, well, they're violating international law. Well, the whole law will go into disarray if you have that. You can't have countries putting themselves, in our country, for instance, domestically, Nixon said if the president does it, it's not illegal. Okay? Well, unfortunately, if you have wrongdoing on the top, then everybody down the line thinks, well, if they're committing wrongdoing, if they're cheating, I can do it too. And so we have a complete breakdown. And actually, it would be very useful to have the moral high ground and benefit from international standards, things like due process, that have stood the test of time. I'm not going to have too much time because I want Ray McGovern to take some time, but these are notions that you can be completely safe and secure, because that's what's promised to us. We'll prevent all terrorism as long as you give us all authority to do these things. And of course you can't be. There's no way, unless you get locked up in a jail cell, that you can be safe and secure. Last thing I'm just going to bring up here is, and actually it's from the Catholic Worker. They came up with this bumper sticker of Jesus Loves WikiLeaks, which is from the Bible. And it is basically that secrecy is pernicious. We kind of think, oh, it's got to be secret. The government can't let us know. It can't give out information. Secrecy will degrade and degenerate all of our institutions if we allow it to. I worked in the FBI, and I will tell you that criminal conspiracies require secrecy. And so what we want to keep people doing their best, keep them on a higher level, is we want transparency. And this is where, I'm going to stop here, but this is where if we can get more honesty, more transparency from elected leaders, from candidates, and actually even from our media, even from our reporters right now, because many times you'll find the media is complicit with this. They're not printing the truth. They're helping fix the intelligence. And if we can answer these questions on here and get leaders to go through them, you know what? I think we actually now do begin to wade back out of this neck deep in the big money. I think this is the answer, is to actually, but we need more of us, and we need more people participating, we need more people caring about the problem. So Ray is going to talk a little bit, and then we're going to answer some questions after this. Give us a second.
Setting up for his presentation. I don't think your mic is on.
Hello?
There you go.
How about now? Okay? If you can't hear me in the back, just raise your hand. We're going to talk now about the use or abuse of intelligence, and I'd like to start out with a very brief clip. It's only 1 minute long, and so if you fall asleep, you're going to miss the whole thing, and it's on the final exam. Okay? And what I'd like you to do is look at the date on which these pronouncements were made. First, someone get the lights?
If you really want to know the truth about the state of Iraq's weapons of mass destruction before the invasion, listen to Colin Powell in February 2001. He states clearly that there was no threat from Saddam Hussein.
He has not developed any significant capability with respect to weapons of mass destruction. He is unable to project conventional power against his neighbors.
And this is Condoleezza Rice, Bush's national security advisor, in July of the same year, saying the same thing, putting the lie to their own propaganda.
We are able to keep arms from him. His military forces have not been rebuilt.
And that, many believe, was the truth, a truth that was covered up and conveniently forgotten after September the 11th, when Bush and Blair decided to attack Iraq.
Okay, what was the date on which Colin Powell spoke? Anyone? 22nd, 2001. Okay, Condoleezza Rice? July. Actually, it was July 29. July 29. So September 11th, it's about, what, 6 weeks? 6 weeks before 9/11. Now, if you're a little confused, that's okay, because you should be. But if you remember the meme, if you remember the slogan that came after 9/11, it's just 4 words. It's very popular in America. I'll say the first 2 and you finish the sentence, okay? After 9/11, everything changed. Everything changed. Whoa, that's good. Yeah. All right. So, whereas before 9/11, Saddam Hussein had no weapons of mass destruction, was not even a threat to his own neighbors. After 9/11, weapons of mass destruction floated down like manna from the heavens for a soft landing on the sands of Iraq, where God made that terrible mistake of putting our oil. You don't get weapons of mass destruction in a couple of months or even a couple of years. And the sad thing that I would like to explain to you is that for the first time since I joined the Central Intelligence Agency's analysis group under John Kennedy in 1963, I watched my profession being corrupted by a president who wanted to make a war of aggression, and by a CIA director, George Tenet, who said, "Yes, sir, my instructions then are to fabricate, to dream up, to forge intelligence to justify this war? Yes, sir, I can do that." And he did. And my former colleagues participated in this fraud. So, please, when Bush left office, he was asked by one of these interviewers, "Do you have any regrets, Mr. President?" He said, "Yeah, I got one big regret, and that was the mistaken intelligence on Iraq." What's wrong with that? It wasn't a mistake, it was fraud. And he knew full well what was going on, and that happened, okay? Now, rather than rehearse all the abuses, and I've got more little clips than you can shake a stick at, I'm going to show you something that shows what happens when you lie. Shows what happens when you start a war of aggression, as defined by Nuremberg. Now, Nuremberg, after World War II, the tribunal said to launch a war of aggression is to perpetrate the supreme international crime, differing from other war crimes only insofar as it contains the accumulated evil of the whole. Whoa. It's pretty serious stuff, folks. I was alive during World War II, and I learned very quickly what that accumulated evil was. Anybody got any suggestions as to what we're talking about here? Anybody? Just shout out. Torture? Kidnapping people off the streets of Western Europe? Putting them in black prisons around the world? Trashing our Fourth Amendment? There was another one? Can't hear it.
Rendition.
Rendition, yeah, okay. So you kidnap them off the streets of Europe, you render them, isn't that a neat word? You render them to places like Egypt or Syria, both of which countries cooperated in our enhanced interrogation techniques as defined by President Bush. Now, something I just pass along to you, you probably haven't heard, but you know, enhanced interrogation techniques is a direct translation of the German for torture. Verschärfte Vernehmung are the two German words. Anybody know German here? Verschärfte, okay, sharpen. Vernehmung, interrogation techniques. Verschärfte Vernehmung appears as a title in the Gestapo handbook, and I have a copy of it if you'd like to see it. So whether they realized it or not, they were using the same label for these techniques, except in a different language. And guess what, folks? Almost all of the techniques were the same. That's accumulated evil. Now, there was a fellow in Baghdad sent there during the surge. We've heard a lot about the surge in 2007. And his name was Bradley Manning. Now his name is Chelsea Manning. And he was with a little group that was asked to round up people who were subversives. And he was asked to arrest and put in prison some young people his age who had written term paper about the corruption in the Iraqi government. And he said, "This isn't right. And this is especially not right because you know," he said to his superiors, "you know what goes on in Iraqi prisons." And they said, "Yeah, but it's, it's none of your business. Go back and keep your mouth shut." Well, he knew what went on there. Torture went on there. And he felt really bad about being compelled to do this. And then he got on his console there and saw a lot of other things that were going on. he decided that he owed it to the American people to show them what was going on, and so he released an awful lot of information, among which was something called collateral murder. Now, some of you may have heard of this, but most of you have not seen it because of the media in our country. And I want to say something about the media before I forget. I try to say this every time. I've been in Washington 52 years now. 52, okay? You see a lot of change in 52 years, but there's one change that dwarfs all the other changes in significance. And that is that we no longer have, in any real sense, a free media. That could not be bigger. Tom Jefferson, when he was asked if you had a choice between a government and a free press, newspapers in those days, which would you choose? He says, no problem. Free press every time. Without a free press, you get a dictatorship like that with a government. So what I'm saying here is that the reason that our media and our government have such a dislike, I would say even hatred, toward Bradley Manning, who's away for 35 years now in a federal prison, Julian Assange, who's holed up in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, afraid to go out into the air where the British police would round him up and send him right back to the United States, or back to the United States, is because they fear these revelations. I'm going to show you something, and then I'm going to ask for a whole minute of silence, because it's not the kind of thing we want to jump in and talk about. Could we see the panorama one? Let me explain before we actually put this on. There was a German TV, one of the main German channels. They wanted to do a documentary, a 60 minutes type documentary, 20 minutes or so, on what happened on this day in July 2007, when Bradley Manning released this video. And so they interviewed several of us and came up with a very good documentary, 20 minutes. So I said to them, you got to make this available in English. And they said, why? Because our 60 minutes would never even touch it. Nobody would touch it. And they said, well, we don't do this. I said, well, let me talk to your supervisor. So I talked to him. Can you undub it? He said, undub? Was ist das denn? Undub? I said, well, undub, that means turn it back into English. And finally, they agreed to do that. So we have 10 minutes worth of the German program, which shows things that you probably haven't seen before. Seeing is believing. This is the real deal. Images are, after all, worth 1,000 words.
A neighborhood in Baghdad, July 2007. Shots are fired from the air, fired from an American Apache helicopter. Minutes later, U.S. infantry soldier Ethan McCord arrives at the scene.
When I came up onto that scene, I remember thinking, oh, well, this guy with the RPG or this guy with the AK-47 obviously did this to the van. There's no way in hell that we would do this.
This military video shocked the world when WikiLeaks released it almost a year ago. And this man is being blamed for illegally downloading it from a secured army network. 23-year-old Bradley Manning, who has been held in solitary confinement for 7 months. A small group of supporters is demanding his release, but their voices are drowned out by media that has largely presumed his guilt.
I'm sorry, that's treason. So there's no gray area about it. And so that is a capital offense. You can't have so you're saying execution. You're saying execution. If he is convicted of treason, I absolutely would support a capital punishment.
Oh, shut down WikiLeaks. But get a presidential order to shut that down. This guy should be tried. Manning should be tried for treason, executed if he's found guilty.
Whoever in our government leaked that information is guilty of treason. And I think anything less than execution is too kind a penalty.
The onboard camera of this attack helicopter is targeting a group of people in a neighborhood in Baghdad. Among them are 2 journalists from the news agency Reuters, the photographer Naminu Eldon and his assistant Said Hamiga. The men can neither see nor hear the helicopter that is stalking them. It is too far away. The pilots mistake Noor Eldon's camera for a weapon. and attack them. Scenes that resemble a video game, but what you see here is real people. The pilots are laughing, making macabre jokes. The Apache gunner is still targeting the heavily wounded Reuters employee Saad Hamega. He will not survive. Later, the Pentagon investigates the incident and concludes that chopper pilots had done nothing wrong. The attack was part of a combat operation. It was justified because earlier American soldiers had come under fire by insurgents. The Pentagon has denied our request for an interview. However, one individual has been punished, Bradley Manning, in jail accused of leaking the video. The charges: downloading and disseminating classified information. His roots lie in Europe. As a teenager, he moved to Great Britain, to the small town Haverford West. His mother is British, his father American. Here, he attended school for 4 years and graduated with Tom Dyer. He was one of Manning's closest friends. To Dyer, it is no surprise that Manning might have released the video. He remembers his friend as a great idealist, even when he was still a teenager.
He had a great moral compass. He knew in himself what was wrong and what was right, and he didn't like the thought of people abusing their status and making other people feel small and doing things that were wrong.
It was precisely for this reason that Manning joined the army. He said he wanted to fight for the good, but during the Iraq War he apparently started to have doubts. As an intelligence analyst, he had access to secret military files, including the video with the disturbing scenes. The video shows how Reuters employee Saad Hamega is struggling for his life. He survived the first shots fired from the attack helicopter. The pilots are still keeping track of him. Meanwhile, Saleh Matasha Tumal and his 2 small children, Sayat and Waha, are on their way to school. From his van, he sees the wounded Reuters employee lying on the curb. Tumal stops the car, gets out to help him. His 2 little children remain in the front of the van. The pilots request permission to shoot, again and again. The father is unaware of all of this. He does not even notice the helicopter above him. Tumal wants to rush the wounded Reuters employee to a hospital. His compassion will seal his fate. When soldiers realize that they have shot children, they only hesitate for a moment, then make cynical remarks from the air. Since that day, U.S. Army soldier Ethan McCord has been heavily traumatized. He still cannot get the images out of his head. As an Army infantryman, he was one of the first soldiers on the scene. When he arrives at the van, he hears the 5-year-old girl scream.
So I grabbed the girl and I took her into the house behind the van with a medic, and we were cleaning her up. And what I did is I took my gloves off and was pulling glass out of her eyes so that she can blink without hitting her eyes.
Then McCord runs back to the van to check on the boy. The child is still alive but badly injured. He carries the boy back to the medics as well. As his superiors observe this, they vehemently order him to stop saving the children. Instead, he should do his job and secure the area they command.
Another thing that bothered me was the fact that I was the only one to care enough, it seemed, for the children to try to ensure that they get medical attention.
Former Army officer Ray McGovern is shocked by the actions of the pilots. He had been a CIA analyst for 27 years and an advisor to 7 presidents, including George Bush Sr.
How could anyone justify shooting up that man, shooting up the person who was crawling onto the curb? These are war crimes, pure and simple. When I learned to be a soldier, an officer in the U.S. Army, I learned that you don't shoot at civilians, you certainly don't shoot at people trying to rescue the wounded, and you don't blow up vans with a couple of children.
In the Pentagon investigation report, there's no mention of war crimes. The pilots had reacted adequately.
Here's the government saying that we did no wrong, but yet they lied. They covered up the story. They covered up everything. And then all of a sudden being like, okay, well, Bradley Manning, who released this video, he's the wrongdoer in this whole situation. It's kind of like, well, we have to have a guinea pig, a fall guy.
Meanwhile, Bradley Manning is isolated. His friend David House is one of the few supporting him, and besides his lawyer, the only person currently visiting Manning in prison.
He is held for 23 hours a day in solitary confinement in his cell. His cell has no windows, and he's not allowed to go outside or see the outdoors. He's not allowed to exercise. The 1 hour a day he is allowed out of the cell, he's allowed to walk in chains in an empty room for an hour, and that was what the military calls exercise in this case.
Conditions that resemble torture. For 7 months, Bradley Manning has been kept in the maximum security ward of the military prison in Quantico, still without trial. The Pentagon regards the prison conditions as perfectly fine, and conservative military experts also think they are appropriate.
Well, first of all, you have to define solitary confinement, which is a very broad and open-ended term as what that means. Does it mean sensory deprivation, which some people consider torture? I don't think he's suffering sensory deprivation. So, as long as somebody's allowed to have 4 hours of continuous sleep, the body can function just fine.
The United Nations, however, has a different view. The UN has picked up the case and is examining the accusations of torture.
Because solitary confinement has been shown to produce the kind of severe mental and psychological harm that is associated with the definition of torture, or if less severe, still associated with cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or punishment.
That doesn't mean that your personal comfort and interests come ahead of the U.S. government. Somebody's been accused of a crime and they're being detained under the conditions which are appropriate for them. That's the way every legal judicial system in the entire Western world works.
Prison without trial for Bradley Manning, freedom for the Apache pilots. Former U.S. soldier Ethan McCord finds this incomprehensible. He's pleased the video has been leaked so that the public can form its own opinion.
I think that Bradley Manning is a hero. I believe that this is a human being who's compassionate, who saw illegal activities taking place on a video. Granted, it was a couple years later, but still wanted the world to see that these actions are intolerable. And, yeah, he's a hero for showing it. He's a hero for releasing it, if he released it.
My view on Bradley Manning is that he's a very courageous young man who, with 22 years, did what I didn't have the guts to do during the Vietnam War.
For 7 years, Ethan McCord had fought proudly for his country. Today, he feels ashamed.
I didn't pull the triggers that day. I didn't shoot people. I didn't shoot those people on the ground. But it's me being a part of the system that is doing that to the people of Iraq is disgusting and hurts. And after that day, it was really hard for me to justify being in Iraq and being a soldier. And I would never be a soldier again. For the American government, it's too dirty.
Okay, I asked before if we could just take a whole minute to do whatever we want to reflect on this, but just to be quiet. I guess I would just say a couple of things about this. There was a Washington Post reporter with that unit. He saw that video. He never mentioned it. Rather, he wrote a book about the heroes in that particular unit. Now, there was a lot of brutalization going on there. Who was being brutalized? Anyone? The Iraqis, and who else? Sorry?
The newsman.
Well, yeah, okay. How about, did you listen to the conversation of those helicopter pilots? Would you agree that they've been brutalized as well? How about Ethan McCord?
Absolutely.
Real trouble with PTSD. Really had trouble living these last several years. Bradley Manning? Oh, Ethan McCord's had real trouble with PTSD, trouble living these last few years.
Can't hear you, Ray.
Ethan McCord has had real trouble living with this. He's had PTSD big time. He too has been brutalized. So, why do I bring this up? I bring this up because these lies are consequential. I bring this up because there are 4 million, count them, Iraqi refugees. 2 seeking homes in their own country, 2 million seeking homes or having found homes in adjacent countries. There are 4 million Syrian refugees. And I was in Germany just 2 weeks ago, and there was this big discussion about, you know, should we take 10,000, 160,000, what, you know, how should we do that? And nobody asked, well, how come there are so many refugees, all right? So you've got to ask yourself these questions, folks. And you in Iowa are uniquely placed to ask candidates who would be our president tough questions. You need to get educated on these things because you can't get educated from the so-called mainstream media. You have to go to places like German television to find out what's really going on. And the best place to get information in this country is a website called democracynow.org. 15 minutes straight news every morning, Monday through Friday, and then things I learn about this country that I never knew from the history books, and a lot of stuff has happened since I had history books, right? So, all I'm saying is that, you know, if we're going to be responsible Americans, we have to know this stuff. We can't ferret it out of the mainstream. If you think you're getting the news by sitting down in the evening and watching TV, you're sadly mistaken. If you think you're getting a right slant on things like the Ukraine, a real powder keg, from reading the New York Times or the Washington Post, forget about it. You're not, okay? Short story on the Ukraine. We started it. We achieved a coup that George Friedman, head of Stratfor, one of the major think tanks, described as the most blatant coup in the history of mankind. Why? Because the planning for this coup between the Assistant Secretary of State for European Affairs and the ambassador we have in Kiev, their conversation about who they picked to be the new prime minister was YouTubeized 2.5 weeks before the coup. Yats is our guy, said Victoria Nuland. Yats. Let Klitschko and the others wait in the wings. Yats is our guy. 2.5 weeks later, I wake up, turn the television on. There's been a coup in the Ukraine. And who's the new prime minister? Yats! I wrote an article right away. Yikes! It's Yats! Okay? And who's the prime minister now? Anybody? Oh, come on. Oh, you don't know who's the prime minister now of Ukraine? Yats!
Poroshenko.
Yats! No, Poroshenko is the president. So, you know, you got to kind of find out what's going on. Everybody thinks Putin bad, Putin very bad. Putin very, very bad. Sometimes have no shirt on. Sometimes ride horse with no shirt on. Putin very, very bad. Invades Ukraine. Did Putin, everybody who thinks Putin invaded the Ukraine, please raise their hand. Okay, well, this is pretty well informed. How did you get the Crimea back after the coup? What was there? A plebiscite. And how many Crimeans wanted to be re-annexed to Russia? 90%? And they knew that's what it was going to be. Crimea's always been part of Russia. What makes Crimea so important?
Warm water.
Yeah, their warm water port. Their only one, okay? That's where they have their naval. So, all I'm saying, folks, is it's the best thing for all of us, and particularly you Iowans now, in these next 3 or 4 months, to do your homework, get one sensible but direct and the kind of question that people can't dance around, okay? And ask it to these people. And that way, we back in Washington, you know, you get on our television. You know, we see this stuff. And to the degree you can make a real conversation out of these things, America will be better in general. So I'll close now because we want to have at least a lot of time for questions. And thanks for listening so intently. We'll just, yeah, please, first.
This attack we saw was made by Gatling guns, and you see Gatling guns used all over the theater. They were originally designed with depleted uranium shells. Does anybody look to see if there were depleted uranium shells used in that particular attack?
Okay, the ammunition here is typically made with depleted uranium. Have we looked into whether that was used now? I have not. But I'm sure that if that were the case, it would have come out. I would have taken those 50 caliber stuff, was it? Yeah. Well, anyhow, I haven't heard that. Yeah. Next. Yes, please.
So, Colleen had commented that there are several simple solutions if there is a political will to carry those solutions out. So what are those simple solutions and how do you carry them out?
For instance, okay, the question was, when I alluded to simple solutions, how do you carry them out? Okay, and I didn't have time to go into them all. The problems, for instance, on pernicious secrecy. One of the things that's causing this secrecy is overclassification. Why? Because it's easier to sit there with that stamp and just classify everything secret. You know, you're not, you know, something won't leak out, and you're being overly cautious. There's a guy who has a secrecy project, and the one way to keep from people it's millions of documents now. It's estimated that there is a need for some logistical secrecy for a short time period. So landing on D-Day, for instance, when that happens, that has to remain secret. The Lusitania sinking that happened 100 years ago does not still need to be secret. That's still classified. Okay, so it can be limited in time, and when it's no longer necessary, it should be declassified. If the person who's classifying just needs to provide a reason why it should be, and the reasons would be sources and methods, there are some concrete reasons. That alone is going to make people be more careful. So secrecy alone, and then again you can have the sharing of information. The law, okay, I talked a little bit and I didn't have time to go into all the ways that the law itself, due process for instance, there's 800 years of experience in the system whereby the police have to use reasonable suspicion. First they have to have suspicion, then they have to have probable cause. And then if they have probable cause, they actually can monitor you. They can do intrusive techniques. And then if they do get evidence, they have to give it to your defense attorney. You get a chance to defend yourself before 12 people. And even if you get convicted, you still have a chance to appeal mistakes. Okay, when 9/11 happens, they say that old constitutional process, and by the way, the Magna Carta going before 800 years even before this, I mean, it's got a longer life. They said that's too cumbersome. We need to put people on Guantanamo. We'll pick them up with bounties. Before that, they even detained people in New York City for about a year. So they did away with really the structure of law. Fourth Amendment, even our First Amendment, we were talking about freedom of press, did away with that in order for expediency. Because war requires that we can't follow those really difficult to follow rules. A lot of the answer here is to restore the rule of law. That isn't rocket science, it already exists. Well, I'm going to go just on the press thing one more time. In the Department of Defense manual right now, there is a paragraph. You know, you're shaking your head, you know about this? There is a Department of Defense manual that actually says journalists can be considered enemy combatants right now. And the reason is they don't want somebody to give out bad information. They're equating that with treason. And if you remember back to the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln had editors jailed who criticized the president, etc. So it's simply to restore the rule of law.
There's one other way to attack this problem, and that is to put in jail the people who perjure themselves. And I have a 1-minute clip here that I'd like to show you. This is a fellow who's head of the NSA and also head of the CIA. And when it came time to explain why NSA was looking at all the telephone calls and emails and everything else, this is what he said.
My understanding is that the Fourth Amendment of the Constitution specifies that you must have probable cause to be able to do a search that does not violate an American's right against unlawful searches and seizures.
The Fourth Amendment actually protects all of us against unreasonable search and seizure.
But the measure is probable cause, I believe.
The amendment says unreasonable search and seizure.
But does it not say probable?
No.
The court standard, the legal standard is probable cause.
Just to be very clear, okay? And believe me, if there's any amendment to the Constitution that employees of the National Security Agency are familiar with, it's the Fourth. And it is a reasonable standard in the Fourth Amendment.
To quote the Fourth Amendment to the Constitution of the United States in its entirety, the one the General and the NSA folks are so familiar with and know is about reasonableness and not about probable cause, quote, the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable searches and seizures shall not be violated, no warrant shall issue, but upon probable cause, supported by oath or affirmation, and particularly describing the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Well, maybe they have a different constitution over there in the NSA.
There's one more that I'd like to show you. This one is a little bit more than a minute. I think it's 1 minute and 15 seconds. And this is very unusual.
Professor Alan Levine, he is the director of the Political Theory Institute, and he's an associate professor of philosophy at AU. So, thank you very much.
Yes, something else. What we're about to introduce here is a Senate hearing at which one very courageous senator named Ron Wyden on the Intelligence Committee decided to ask the head of national intelligence, in other words, the guy who sits over NSA, CIA, and all the others. His name is James Clapper. This was before Ed Snowden made his revelations, but Senator Wyden and others already knew what was going on. So Senator Wyden wanted to get James Clapper under oath and ask him a specific question, and I'll leave the rest to the 1.5.
Just one, Madam Chair, and I thank you, and this is for you, Director Clapper, again on the surveillance front, and I hope we can do this in just a yes or no answer, because I know Senator Feinstein wants to move on. Last summer, the NSA director was at a conference, and he was asked a question about the NSA surveillance of Americans. He replied, and I quote here, "The story that we have millions or hundreds of millions of dossiers on people is completely false." The reason I'm asking the question is, having served on the committee now for 12 years, I don't really know what a dossier is in this context. So what I wanted to see is if you could give me a yes or no answer to the question, does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
Thank you. I'll have additional questions to give you in writing on that point, but I thank you for the answer.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, folks, what happened to James Clapper?
He got his butt kicked.
I mean, he lied under oath, right? On a very important issue having to do with the Fourth Amendment. What happened to him?
Nothing.
What's he doing now? Anybody know? He's head of national intelligence, just as he was before he lied. That's how bad it is, folks. That's how bad it is. So, one simple solution, if I could add my 2 cents, is you put clapper in the clapper is what you do, you know? You put these liars in the clapper, you hold them accountable, and maybe the next set of potential liars will think twice about it. There's a question back there.
Yes, sir. Are you still in the loop, Ray?
Am I still in the loop? Qu'est-ce que c'est loop?
Well, basically, are you aware of what's kind of going on? The question is...
Yes, I am.
About a year and a half or some time ago when Ashton Carter became the Secretary of Defense, supposedly the first day that he was in operation, he shut down the CIA for some unknown reason, and about a week later the head of the CIA said, "We have a new mission statement now." What was that fiasco all about?
I'm trying to follow what you said. Let me see if I repeated correctly. When Ashton Carter was named Secretary of Defense, what did he do?
First day, he went and shut down the CIA.
Oh, where'd you hear that? No, really, we need to know our sources here. There's all kinds of stuff on the web, but not all of it is credible. That's why I mentioned Amy Goodman. That's all you need. The other stuff you have to be really careful of. He didn't shut down the CIA. I don't know where you got that.
Well, about a week later, on national TV, the new head of the CIA basically said, "We have a new mission statement."
Well, again, please let me see your source for that. This is new information for me. And in answer to your first question, I am very much in the loop.
This one right here. I had a question for Ms. Rowley.
Yes.
First of all, thank you both for coming tonight. This has been very informative, and glad you're here. You mentioned that the public is the best intelligence. Wonder if you could expand on that. Also, could you say something about how you see the current state of the FBI in this country, in this world?
And I just thought of a better way of maybe phrasing that, but fix the intelligence sharing, don't fix the intelligence, okay? There are, ways of gathering accurate intelligence. Those memos we threw up were accurate. The Defense Intelligence Agency right now has 52 intelligence analysts who have filed a complaint, an Inspector General complaint a couple of weeks ago, because their reports are being rewritten and being, i.e., fixed, to paint apparently a more rosy picture of what the bombing of ISIS or something. So the key is to fix this intelligence sharing and then to share as much with the public, because the public does need to know these things. How else can we even vote intelligently? There would be accountability. Accountability will come really from the public. If the public doesn't care and doesn't know these things, there is no way for it to be held accountable. Now, the FBI, did some good things, did some bad things, mixed bag. Of course, they were certainly, my memo kind of exposed some of those lapses in the FBI, led to a 2-year-long Inspector General investigation, which was good. It dealt with 2 or 3 of the major ones. Guess what? The CIA and the NSA were kind of given a free pass. We have information that actually, from some of the NSA people that we know, that the NSA director was it Hayden at the time? Hayden, at the time, who was just quite happy that they were focusing on the FBI because that left them off the hook. And they also would have been able to prevent 9/11 quite easily. If we had our NSA colleague up here, he could explain that they actually could have gotten or did have the number in California that was calling to Yemen, to the Al-Qaeda. I mean, the public doesn't know any of this, again. So the FBI did some good things. After 9/11, one good thing it did is when the CIA began this torture process, our agent, one of only 7 Arabic FBI agents in the whole country, happened to be at the scene with the only terrorist suspect, the first one caught, Abu Zubaydah. And he had actually gotten good information from Zubaydah already. He had learned the mastermind. Some of the things you see in Zero Dark 30, You see this fictionalized thing, it gets tortured out of people. No, Ali Soufan had gotten that with no torture by building rapport, which is a tried and true FBI techniques. And then, when he was pulled out and they said, no, the CIA is going to take over and get the information. Dark side, dark side. He called back to FBI headquarters and he says, this is against everything we ever learned or were told. And again, he probably even knew it violated international law. And the FBI high-level person said, the FBI is pulling out of this. That was one of the good things they did. They actually didn't quite go. There were some people who watched, I think, but they didn't, and they kept their mouths quiet, and nobody really leaked it forever, but they themselves pulled out. The intelligence, again, you have to understand that I don't think it's been fixed. I think for a while after 9/11, there was this effort to share more broadly inside of government. That's actually why Manning is privy to some of these things, because for a while they recognized the mistake and they were trying to share information. But as the last couple of years and what they call the insider threat program, which is trying to keep all information bottled up, it's gone in the exact opposite direction. And I think I've never even seen where they've made a rule that you have to have some accountability for reading what is sent to you. So I don't see anything that people could say, still to this day, have a memo that said something and then afterwards say, never saw it, never read it. I have never seen a fix for that.
There was another, let's have a woman question here.
I'm very glad you brought up Amy Goodman and Democracy Now! I think it's very hard to find out how to be able to hear her. I wish you would spend a little time telling people about Free Speech TV. Everything that I've learned about what's happening through our democracy has been explained very well by Amy Goodman. It's happening not only in your field, but in all other fields in our democracy. When corporations were given the right to use the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, when they were given personhood, they began using our Constitution and Bill of Rights. The very worst thing they did, everybody knows, the Citizens United case, because they were persons, they could go to the Supreme Court and say, we want to use the First Amendment. They used the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, their money is their free speech, and now there's huge amounts of money going to both parties, and we're getting senators and representatives that pass laws that the big corporations want. Our democracy is going by the wayside. So more and more people need to hear and listen to free speech TV.
Right, so it's a really good question, and let me tell you what I do. I get up about 7:30 in the morning because Amy Goodman on Democracy Now! Is on 8 o'clock live in Washington, okay? And I go downstairs, and for the next 15 minutes, I try to brew a cup of coffee because it takes that long for an Irishman to brew a decent cup of coffee. And I'm talking instant coffee, too. Then I'm awake enough to watch Amy Goodman. Now, there's 15 minutes of straight news, and then generally 45 minutes of incredible interviews with people you'll never see in mainstream media. When I get a call from CNN or from RT or some other place to do an interview in the afternoon, they'll ask me, do you know about this? I said, of course I know about that. How will I have learned that? Because Amy Goodman had it on the news thing. So, it's real easy. I learned later, you don't have to get up at 8 o'clock or 7:30. It's on all the time if you have a computer. DemocracyNow.org. They rerun it, and then if you wait 2 hours, they have a transcript of what's going on, an instant transcript. So you didn't have to waste a lot of time watching the video. You could read the transcript. And I have to tell you that it's far and above any other source. There are other sources, consortiumnews.com, for which I write, and raymcgovern.com, which my son created for my stuff about 7 years ago. If you go to that, you can see my speeches, my interviews, as well as my articles. So there are all kinds of ways to get this stuff, but you have to sort of realize that it is via the fifth estate, what I call the fifth estate, that you can get real information, not the fourth estate. Yeah, you've had your hand up for a while.
Well, I'm actually very curious about how you you react to a story that has been in the mainstream news the last couple of days. That is the, quote, release of 6,000 more of Hillary Clinton's Secretary of State documents, but then the classifying of 500-something of them so that people can't see them. I think you'd have a nice comment.
You know, I think that, explains itself. I'm not going to comment on any candidates, except maybe I could ask this gentleman to read the back of my shirt. Read that. This here.
Know where you stand and stand there. We stand against endless wars. This VFP shirt is issued in honor of Ray McGovern, commemorating his arrest for standing silently with his back to Hillary Clinton while she spoke in defense of freedom of expression, February 15, 2011.
Hopelessly biased. Question? Yeah, please.
I was wondering if you could address the counterterrorism cases in the United States since 9/11. A number of them seem to have been sting operations by the FBI preying on mentally unstable people.
Yeah, I mean, there's a book written. Can you help me with the title? A book has come out. Nate. Someone help me. Aronson, Nate. Anyways, there's an entire book out now that is taken apart or really delved into the hundreds of cases. I've been retired since 2004, so some of this I'm getting all of it, not just some of it. I'm getting all of this from news. But it looks like this massive dragnet out there, it doesn't really help stop real terrorists, but what it can do is it can then target people. It's one of the ways, at least, that might serve to target people. And sometimes these people are vulnerable to being pushed or manipulated. The truth is, entrapment is against the law. And when we had real undercover investigations, we had to actually lecture the undercovers and stuff, because if you are getting people to commit crimes, our country has enough real crime. You need to pay salaries to FBI people to get all of us to commit crimes because you're good at pressuring. I was privy to a case up in the Twin Cities where they got this 20-year-old to make a Molotov cocktail, but the guy in his group that kind of pushed him to make the Molotov cocktail was a 31-year-old FBI informant. Well, what have we accomplished when you have a system like this? Yeah, people make salaries, but you're not accomplishing anything. So a lot of these have been these kinds of cases, and they'll actually get evidence, you were going to push the plunger because that plays to a jury. But would that person have on their own become a terrorist? That's a whole different story. The cases that are real cases are the Sarnoff brothers in Boston, Major Hassan, who shot at the base, the underwear bomber. They always say, well, we kept us safe. We haven't had any real terrorism. That's not true. There were cases. And even the D.C. sniper, for heaven's sakes, which occurred right after 9/11. The anthrax killer. The anthrax killer, by the way, we don't know exactly. There's discussion or controversy to this day as if he was the person who committed suicide. But what is quite well established is it was a scientist or somebody at our military, Fort Detrick or one of these other forts that work with chemical or biological weapons. Okay, so we know that. And that's, of course, these are real cases. Obviously, the anthrax case was a real case. It wasn't stopped. It wasn't prevented.
I'd just like to add very quickly that aside from the people who were entrapped, there were a couple of people who, let me put it this way. There are folks in Washington who believe that when Muslim babies come out of the womb, they do two things. The first is to cry, ah, and the next thing, I hate Americans! I hate Americans! Okay? And that's the John Brennan theory. Because when Helen Thomas, to her great credit, asked John Brennan, Why is it they try to do these things? Why is it? He said, well, they're Islamists. He said, they're Islamic people. Well, yeah. So it's religion? No, it's more than religion. They just hate us. She said, yeah, but you never say why. Okay, that's number one. Now, Janet Napolitano got up at the same briefing and said, the real danger is self-radicalization. Okay? So picture the guy gets up in the morning, oh, pretty nice day to self-radicalize. I think I'll self-radicalize today. Give me a break. The reason they hate us, it's not because they hate our democracy or they hate our freedom. They hate what we do. They hate our 100% identification with the state of Israel, to whom we give $3 billion in military aid every year. And they hate what we do in propping up Saudi dictators and all that kind of stuff. So let me just say this, that the way you defeat terrorism is not by, corrupting our youth or by self-radicalization moving against that. The way you prevent it is the same way you prevent malaria. There was a piece in the Times today, New York Times, about malaria. It's almost completely prevented. Now, how do you prevent malaria? How do you combat malaria? Well, you find the mosquitoes, right? And you trace them back to the swamp where they breed, right? And then the first thing you do is you set up 2 platoons of sharpshooters and you try to hit all the mosquitoes as they leave the swamp, right? Well, that's not quite right, is it? What's the analogy here? So-called terrorists, the people who live in Islamic societies that we have been bombing the hell out of, have legitimate grievances. Not only the drones, not only the bombs, but the way we've propped up their dictators, the way we've helped Israel to do the things that they are doing. These are legitimate grievances. And there's a whole swamp of them, okay? And if you want to get rid of terrorists, you got to get rid of their grievances. And the way you do that is the same as with malaria, you drain the swamp, okay? Nobody seems to recognize that, or maybe they do recognize it, and what the Pope called the blood-drenched arms trade, and what Eisenhower called the military-industrial congressional complex. Maybe that's just a little too tough. And that's why you guys really are in a position now to expose that, to ask real questions of these guys, and gals, if you will, men and women who would be our president, because these things are not all that difficult to understand. Last little question, little example here. When there were the 68 riots, 1968, after Dr. King was killed, there was bedlam in Washington. I was there. 14th Street was ablaze. Marion Wright Edelman, the head of the Children's Defense Fund, an incredible person. She went down, there were several other distinguished leaders, and there was a young man, and he was about 14, and he had this big rock, and he's about to throw it into this picture window. And she grabbed his hand, she said, "Son, don't do that." And he said, "Well, why not?" She said, "Well, think of your future." He says, "Man, I ain't got no future." Now, when you ain't got no future, that's what you do.
I was going to ask you, in all your years where you briefed presidents, is there a particular day or a briefing? Yeah, in all your years where you briefed presidents, is there a particular memorable day or briefing that you wish you never would have disseminated, and or you would have done it in a different way?
With all due respect to the audience here, I don't talk about anything that I briefed in those sessions. They are sort of sacrosanct, and those are legitimate secrets. The reason, of course, being that I don't want to protect this privilege for my successors. And if we alumni start talking about this or that president, that's how he wrote that confidence.
One more
I think we want, yeah. One more. You were the first one that I saw over there.
My question comes in 2 parts. Was Alex Station successful? Why and why not?
This is on CBS.
was AnalystsTalk successful? Why and why not? And what is the rationale behind creating programs such as ThinThread and
Programs such as what?
ThinThread.
ThinThread.
Yep. And what do you think of the latest leak of the Office of Personal Management and reports that there are Chinese hackers there?
Oh my gosh, good questions. Yeah, ThinThread, the first one was AnalystsTalk. Well, maybe Ray can add to this, but I think they were, before 2001, somewhat successful. They had actually pinpointed some of this. Afterwards, if you read the stories, again, this is some of the reasons why the Zero Dark 30 movie is so fictitious. It looks like some of the people that came out of that AnalystsTalk were actually the ones who really flubbed up repeatedly and repeatedly. You know, there was a bombing in Pakistan of the CIA because they had a Jordanian that they thought was their informant. Well, that looks like it came out of one of the officials that came out of that environment. Same, and actually as a model for the woman, the fake fictional character is modeled after somebody, has had 2 or 3 major flub-ups. Another one was arresting a poor innocent guy with the wrong last name Masri, and they thought he was a terrorist because of his last name. He was sent, he was tortured. The guy now has been paid money because he was tortured for months. Same group. And there were other things in that. And I think that group is the ones that didn't share the information, or at least some of the same people were involved in preventing the information from being shared with the FBI. So I think a mixed bag. And ThinThread, you want to? Sure.
ThinThread was a in-house development program developed by Bill Binney and Ed Loomis. These 2 people are now alumni, and they're part of our whistleblowing group. It was designed to allow the very quick processing of emails and all kinds of other things, while protecting American citizens' names. In other words, they remained encrypted. And this program cost $330 million. And the head of NSA, our favorite General Hayden, who was so good on the Fourth Amendment, killed it. Why? Because he was offered $3.3 billion to develop a more sophisticated plan and give contractors all this money, and the more sophisticated Trailblazer, I think it was called, never worked. They had abandoned it. So that's how deep this corruption goes. You get a lot of money, Congress appropriates a lot of money, ostensibly for countering terrorism, and instead of this program that worked, and I can tell you, because Tom Drake told me, they had the information before 9/11 from ThinThread, okay? Now, it wasn't shared with anyone else, and what really bothered Tom was sitting in executive sessions with General Hayden, watching the 9/11 Commission do its number on the FBI and the CIA, and as Tom explains it, General Hayden was chortling, his word, chortling. We lied, and we don't have to testify. Your third question?
Chinese hackers. I have a little bit of a response to that. You know, the big thing now is cyber warfare. And they are basing this on some of the hacking, for instance, is conflated with terrorism. Okay, I say just go back to calling things crimes and actually using the judicial process. Security, security, in our case, to protect our records, our OPM records, social security records, health records, is desirable, absolutely. We should have security built in. One of the problems that your NSA whistleblowers will tell you with this back doors that they created into systems with all of our internet companies, they created back doors in there so that they could gain all this, you know, non-relevant information in your whatever. That also then enables the hackers to follow those back doors. So there are a lot of security people. It's very counterintuitive to the normal person. But there's a lot of security people that don't want the NSA to be doing what it's doing because it's actually increasing vulnerability for others to follow the same paths.
Just want to add a footnote here. There are a few things that can change the whole strategic equation, okay? Now, we have been predominant because we have the money, well, let's face it, because we spend half of your tax money on what we call defense. 50%. People say 54%. That's more than the whole rest of the world put together. Talk about military-industrial complex. Okay, there it is in spades. Now, what I'm trying to say here is that that could just change in terms of the strategic equation, because, you know, with cyber warfare, it could be that the premium really is on really smart people, really good at hacking in, and if you get so many Chinese well-educated people, they can figure out how to disable your aircraft carrier, your aircraft, your satellite collection. So there's an even playing field that is developing now. And maybe you could just ask your candidates about that. Why do we spend $1 out of every $2 that you collect from our taxes? Why do we spend that on defense contractors, on people making the weapons, selling the weapons, and engaging in what the Pope called the blood-drenched Palm Street? Why do you do that? Because what you should be doing is working out an arrangement with the rest of the world whereby cyber warfare could be contained or regulated in some way, because otherwise we lose our advantage. And that's a big deal. If we lose our advantage and commanders in the Mediterranean, for example, on the aircraft carrier can't be sure that, you know, they can launch their planes, well, that's a really unstable situation. What are they going to do? They're going to launch them before any hint of cyber warfare comes. So cyber warfare is really important. Thanks for asking that question.
Thanks, everybody, for coming.
I had to plug into my power pack because I was...
If anybody has any real burning questions, we're going to stand outside for a little while, but we're going to have to close the room.
I don't need that to walk out to the car. I've got a show. We have a heater. You have to get to your car to turn it on. Yeah,
Okay, I'm just...
information that's out there that's really important. Architecture,
Just grabbing my bags. We'll go ahead and move on out. So. I'm going to see if I can ask her a question about someone whose case I've been following for quite a few years. Well, several years. I'm just going to ask her if she knows of the case of Ziad Yagi from...
Yeah.
And how vulnerable.
Yeah. Look at opium.
Yeah.
Opium's a great example.
And who did it? Do you actually know?
I don't know.
No, not necessarily you, but you think it's China.
Yeah, but be really careful of those quick things that they put out there, because you really have to know what evidence this is. They said the MH17 downing had to be. No one knows for sure. To this day, no one, and it might actually go unsolved. The sarin gas, the same thing. Actually, there is more evidence it was homemade sarin by the part of the rebels.
That's what I heard.
Yeah. So
actually, I had the Egyptian pattern back then.
Oh, Oh,
So yeah,
okay.
I was born in Egypt.
Okay.
My parents came here a very long time ago.
Oh,
And
okay.
it's just
Yeah.
and I try and one of the things that we're trying to do is I'm trying to start a big group in Adre that we're trying to get more involved into the issues of national security because moreover than that, people kind of like glaze over it.
Yes, right. Yep. Well, you can even see when you ask questions, even of a knowledgeable audience, few people follow this set closely. That means, oh well, it's happening to other people, Afghans and Yemenis and whatever, so it doesn't worry me. Well, I'm having a good life. And they're not seeing the blowback. They're not seeing what Chalmers Johnson. If you ever have to read a good book, read Chalmers Johnson. He's dead now, but before he died,
What's the book called?
There's 3 books. The one that's probably most well known is called The Sorrows of Empire. SORROWS. The Sorrows of Empire. It is about the things that happen and the blowback that migrates back from wars abroad. So you think you're only doing these things abroad, nobody cares. They're not seeing how this creeps back on our laws, on our corruption of our government, the military-industrial complex. You're not seeing these things.
But one of the things that is most fascinating to me is, for example, like the Stellar Wind program, the entire idea. Why do people create it? Like why would a government create it?
It's money. It's really money. Yes, you're talking.
Does it really boil down to that?
It is. Crassly, it really is. And people do not understand when they have a conflict of interest. We have a big revolving door now between government and private money making. These generals, Hayden, Keith Alexander, he had contracts, consultancy contracts, Keith Alexander, former head of the NSA, worth $18 million. You don't think that's going to make an impact on your decisions before you leave?
But
I mean,
does
all
it
of
go
these
all
things.
the way up to that? Does it go all the way up to 1600 Pennsylvania? Like the president.
It's all the way, even on the lower levels, people get these lower level jobs. Even our contractors, for instance, the military, get offered $100,000, $200,000 to join a Blackwater. And these are low levels.
Yeah, but
everything up to the higher levels, like a Keith Alexander, that he's looking at millions of dollars on the line. Well, you know what? No human is going to be able to say, I'm going to make a decision without any regard to my own ability to make millions of dollars. So that's the problem. It's a vast corruption that no human being, can really rise above.
I don't know why, because the reason why I choose to defend the intelligence community is that without my trust in them, it is nothing more.
Scary.
It's nothing more than a bunch of thugs getting together and carrying out.
And it's scary for people that are scared.
That's why I defend it, or that's why I give them the benefit of the doubt.
I think there are good people. This is a different story. There are good people in any institution, but lots of good institutions go bad, and it's not because they're not otherwise good people. It's about the pressures and the forces and the systems you create. And Eisenhower's warning about the military-industrial complex. There's the new little brother, national security surveillance complex, and they're corrupting people. And these are otherwise good people, but they actually fall in line because there's too much money out there. It's too tempting.
Is there any steps that you personally take that would lessen the encounter with?
Well, one is to end this revolving door. There's supposed to be government ethics law where you weren't even. I taught ethics in constitutional law in the FBI. We weren't even allowed to accept a mug or a little gift if it was over $20. Yeah, you could accept a mug. It was called the mug rule. Anything under $20. Okay, well, look at these people. Look at what's going on with the millions of dollars passing hands. That should be enforced. And when they catch people, I haven't heard since Abscam. You have to go all the way back to 1979 when the FBI actually tried to get congressmen and they took bags of money. Because there's not been any enforcement.
What was your question?
I should do Cunningham.
Actually, I was going to ask about the case of South Carolina man born in the U.S. He's a natural-born citizen, but his family is from a Middle Eastern background, and he went to Jordan on vacation to visit relatives who live in Jordan, but when he came back, he was arrested and immediately detained, and He's been in solitary ever since in various prisons. The FBI tried to make him an informant. He refused, so they accused him of plotting to kill Americans because he refused to be an informant on other Muslims.
What's his name? I think I've heard of him.
Ziyad Yagi.
Aren't big
I read the story
name
somewhere.
speakers.
Yeah, there's a Facebook group called Free Ziyad Yagi.
Educational to bring. There's a
Did
whole
you,
bunch of
do you ever
whistleblowers.
watch
John
Democracy
Kiriaki
Now?
Oh, I don't get to watch it.
Well, it's on a computer, you know.
Yeah, but
It is a great show. I watch it all the
yeah,
time.
it's also available on some radio stations. A rebroadcast later in the day.
You can watch it anytime you want on the computer.
To
Yeah.
finally reverse its
Good
rule
show.
that allowed its psychologists to participate in torture. So they're out there, and there's good speakers. Just don't bring like Condi Rice and all the people that are, University of Minnesota paid Condi Rice over $200,000. She had a private jet. Her contract demands a private jet, and her honorarium was $150,000. She spoke for a half an hour on civil rights, 50-year anniversary of civil rights. If you know her connection to civil rights, her family moved away when Martin Luther King was leading the effort on civil rights, and yet she is brought in to speak and paid over a couple $100,000.
Is that also how you also feel about Hillary? Okay.
Well, I think that many of the people that they bring in and actually pay vast sums to are politicians. They are the people that, and they actually, you look at their backgrounds. I wrote an article. If you Google Colleen Rowley and Condi Rice and University of Minnesota, and I was like, people said, what? She gave the orders to torture? Yeah, you think she's a beautiful black woman, the political identity.
Was it Rumsfeld?
Huh?
Was it Rumsfeld that also okayed it?
Yeah, they all did. But Condi, when it came to the CIA and waterboarding, she was directly involved. Rumsfeld was involved earlier on this Geneva Conventions when they legalized torture that way. So yeah, I mean, I wrote this, and people go, Condi? How could she have been involved? Again, people aren't paying attention at all.
It's denial. It's denial. Yeah.
Yep. Take one of our things.
I have actually. You actually got two of them.
Did you get one? Okay. I'm pushing these postcards, and if you never come across a candidate or an elected leader,
I come across them too often.
Okay, I'm gonna give you more.
But I don't know if I can tell them.
No, what you can. You can say, there's a lot of questions on here. Can you please think about answering them? Ask one of them out loud. Make up your own. These are just suggestions. If you don't get rid of them, write a question, your own, down here in handwriting. You don't have to write your name. Write a question in handwriting and throw a 35-cent stamp on.
But is it weird that I think it's bad that my generation knows the answer to every question and we're still okay with it?
Well, I don't know that people really know the full scope of all of the questions, and I think that it's very difficult to make a politically correct answer on some of these because they don't have a politically correct answer.
Like, why armed dictatorship? Why armed terrorists and rebel groups? The first thing you can think of is Assad and Egypt, for example. I'm just gonna think to home. We have a dictator right now at home. Why arm him? Because whoever.
Saudi Arabia.
And who else is going to be in power? The Muslim Brother, Islamists. It's just so easy.
Why armed dictatorships and why armed terrorists and rebel groups? I mean, this is what the Pope is really complaining about. We are just destabilizing the entire world. Telling this group go fight, and then telling the other group. And there's actually documents. One of them is an Israeli that wrote this, but there's others as well. Some neocons. They said, "Isn't this great? We got them fighting them, and they're going to kill each other. And you know what our best policy is? We just watch this happen." And they don't think.
It's like Truman.
No, but these are things
playing both sides.
Written pretty recently, and that's where the Pope is coming from. You know what? It isn't that easy. It isn't that easy to play global chess and get one group, one rebel group. The Mujahideen that the U.S. armed, that turned out to be the Taliban and Al-Qaeda. And this is blowing back. ISIS is similar. This is blowing back, and they thought it was really so smart to get this violence going. And actually now it is blowing back. It has to be ceasefires. You have got to get ceasefires and stability back in some of these areas because it's extremely dangerous. And I would like to hear a candidate say that. I would like to hear a political candidate. If they don't tell the truth, they're going to mumble, because I don't know what the answer should be. Why armed dictatorships? Saudi Arabia is beheading somebody every other day right now.
Same fashion as ISIS.
What?
In the same fashion as ISIS.
Yeah, and they got put. The worst thing about Saudi Arabia recently, this just happened this week, they are beheading somebody every other day, just like ISIS. They were made the head of the UN Human Rights Council, Saudi Arabia. Can you imagine worse? What if people knew? What if more people knew about this? I don't think you would say this, most people would have known. If more people knew, I honestly don't think it would happen. I think
people will not know. And that's why I want to talk a little bit more about the power of the big corporations in this country. Every time I go to something like this, whichever subject is being talked about, it always comes back that we have to have laws changed. And how can we get those laws changed when the corporations...
Corruption. They're corrupting it. That's what we were talking about.
Yeah, but you know what? There is a way to change it. The way the corporations have all their power is because they were allowed to use our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. Now, you can't just say that's true.
Citizens United was a real problem.
And now McCutcheon on top of that.
We should reverse that, yeah.
Yeah, all right. Then why, as long as you're talking about you're doing as enthusiastic as you, why don't you say along with it, in order to get this problem change that we're having and pointing out to you, we are going to need to take our power back from the corporation. The only way you can take the person, do you know how you can take personhood away back from the corporation?
There's a couple ways, but yeah, one of it is to get a constitutional amendment.
Yes, and the other way is the Supreme Court would reverse that, and that wouldn't happen. The Constitutional Amendment, it is a huge process, but there are people working on it to get that done. And if you would, each group that's having a grievance that has to get resolved by a law, by laws, the best laws to get passed.
It is an underlying problem. Besides that,
it's the main underlying
it is a main
problem.
one. There's actually more that goes into the corruption besides that with this military-industrial complex. It is a main one. I don't disagree with you.
That's the corporation. The military-industrial complex is one part of the corporation.
The Citizens United case didn't address the revolving door problem that existed already even beginning in Eisenhower time, and that actually is a big problem too. And Citizens United didn't.
It's all connected. That revolving door is
it
also
just,
connected
I would,
with the big
say it just got
corporations.
worse and worse and worse and worse. And then Citizens United made it worse.
They've had corporate personhood since 1886, and now they did the very worst thing in 2010 when they passed. When they got the Supreme Court to do the...
That was a very bad
their money is their free speech. In order to get our democracy back, we have to reverse that. So use some of your energy. Use some of your energy, and you are.
I've spoken on that before too. Let's go. You've been standing here a long time.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you.
I guess it's okay to stay in this room.
Well, I was out there for a while. They said everybody's down here. But I'll try to be real quick. I really appreciate your example of your witness and the fact that you're a native Iowan and I think a fellow graduate of the University of Iowa College of Law. Okay.
You too, Iowa?
Yeah. But what I want to ask, and I am not a conspiracy theorist.
That movie, that film about Hillary Clinton.
But I've read some of the
stuff. That's one of the things, and I don't
specifically about architects and scientists have suggested that building could not have gone down without explosives. Is there any? It's just almost more than the brain wants to comprehend.
I've called. I'm not a physicist, and I stay out. I'm not an architect, so I stay out of that part of it. I will tell you, I haven't really seen any solid. I have talked. I have listened to Gage, one of the heads of that talk, and I haven't seen anything that I found convincing. I've had other physicists say, "Oh yeah, this is why it did it." But it has never been answered. There are questions. There's the 28 pages that have not been released about connections to Saudi Arabia. And I will say that we should have a new 9/11 investigation because people,
didn't have enough time.
that's right, they themselves, exactly, they've written a book that they were hampered. Eleanor Hill, the Pentagon analyst who was in charge of the first Joint Intelligence Committee, she was the one before the 9/11 Commission. There's a YouTube of her when she came out out with her findings. She goes, I'm just going to tell you, before I start, I could not go up the ladder. I am just a Pentagon analyst in this 9/11, and I had to stop. And she actually says that she could not go into asking the highest levels. Even General Taguba, he was a two-star general, he couldn't go above the people at the low levels on the torture. Who gave the orders for these things? Rumsfeld. You think a two-star general could go up against the head of the Pentagon? So when you put up your inquiries, a lot of times the people that are doing them, inspector generals, people are already lower ranking, and they can't. When it's at the top, when the orders and the green lights came from the top, they can't go any higher. But over time, you can. So we need probably, when we get, especially when we get some distance here, we need to have some new investigation and inquiry. I have heard really solid questions about why did this happen? Why did the planes, they didn't get alerted in time? Someone told me this, and I'm not sure. I have no way of knowing. They said that there are ways, even if your flight gets taken over, there are manual ways then that from the ground they can defeat that. Now, I don't know if that's true, but I heard that. Well, if it is, what a heck of a good question. Because once they know this is going on, why wouldn't they have done that?
There's a report that there were like 5 guys on a bridge.
Yes. Right. All of these things. There's
it's
really
just almost, you don't want to.
Yeah. There are a lot of good questions. I just don't know anything about what they call the demolition theory. And since I don't know anything about that, some people say there were no hijackers. I honestly know a lot of evidence that there was a fingerprint on the check from our case. I mean,
some people say
I think that's
no. Anyway, thank you so much.
Can I ask a question? Since do you know of the case of a South Carolina man who was arrested at age 19 when he came back from a vacation in Jordan to visit his relatives? He's a natural-born U.S. citizen, but he was arrested. His name is Ziyad Yagi.
Yeah, I know.
You know that?
Yeah.
And
I think his mother was even. She might have been on my Facebook or something for a while.
Yeah. There's a Facebook group called Free Ziyad Yagi.
There's some real travesties, and actually, even in Cedar Rapids, there appears to be a guy that's being. At least he's being unfairly punished.
Yeah.
He had a halal meat thing. You hear these cases, and this whole Islamophobia and whatever is really causing some serious miscarriages of justice.
Yeah. And
I actually was on the Muslim Legal Fund of America board where they tried to get good attorneys, funding good attorneys that would try to argue these cases, because a lot of them, these people are now in prison and jail.
Yeah, and he has been in solitary ever since, and he was just recently moved again. But I would like to know is there a way to stop this? So for instance, I'm a convert to Islam. My family's been in this country since 1849. How can I be assured that I will not get arrested and charged with bogus charges because I didn't want to be an informant on my...
Nobody can be assured.
Yeah. And how can U.S. citizens who are born in this country be deported? Legally, it's not, the law says no, but, can that happen?
Yeah, I think they even deported people once they're abroad. They won't let them come back in, which is the equivalent.
Yeah, that happened to a retired black congresswoman.
Yeah.
And now I can't find info on that anymore. That case is, it's like it's been wiped off the internet.
Yeah. Well, we can't be assured. We have to work harder. So, did you have a question? You're kind of...
Can I have one of your postcards?
Yes. You know my last...
Yes. Did you get one?
Yeah.
I have 2.
She had some.
Okay. Well, then I get
I
you.
think
And thank you very much for an excellent talk.
Oh, thank you very much. That makes me feel good.
When I get home, I'm going to put this up on my YouTube channel.
Oh, take my drones kill children.
Yes.
Captive audience to look at the sign.
Yep. I'm going to get a picture of this guy's shirt before I get out of here.
My grandchildren or my kids killed her, or family members to friends. If you even know the story during Vietnam, where these groups were actually kind of just protesters, and then they got targeted, in some cases, Kent State, whatever, and friends got killed, that's actually what radicalized them. And these were Americans. They killed their friends, and most of their friends said, Joe, guess what? I just really, that would get, mad. It's hard not to. And then we said, oh, why did you
Could I get a picture of the back of your shirt?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to post it up on Facebook. The light is...
I'll turn around.
Yeah, this way is good. This way is good. Oops.
And that's why I study what I study. Because studying politics doesn't mean
Right.
So my friend comes from the same background, and him and I traveled throughout Europe during the war.
There, that'll do. Thanks.
First year of college, I didn't see him in college, but
Thank you very much. Hold them.
I'm just... I'm just sticking my tablet back in my bag and one of my anti-drone signs that was put up on the board here. I'm putting that back in a bag. So, but sorry about that. But I'm going to capture a little bit of this.
I use a computer, but I prefer. Is there anything like The Economist?
Economist is among the worst.
Is it really?
Yeah.
My son swears by it.
Yeah, well, it's got some enlightened political analysis, but editorially, it's really full square.
Are there any?
Well, the nation is good. Yeah.
Oh, Salon has some good stuff.
Who?
Salon. Salon.com.
Yeah, Salon.com.
Or Fire Dog Lake, or...
I was asking about print media.
Yeah, the Nation is very cheap to subscribe to. They have ways of getting it delivered to you where they don't get soaked by the U.S. mail. And what else?
Well, it used to be, what was it, I.F. Stone, or who was it that used to have was supposed to Izzy or something?
Izzy Stone?
Yeah, years ago. It was, I don't know how big it was, I never read it.
Let me do something for you here, because the editor for whom I write, and I've been writing for a long time, the only guy that I welcome giving my stuff to said, do it, fix it up, Bob. And he has turned many a sow's ear that I've given him into a silk purse. Right? So, no, but he's just been awarded the Stone Award.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. So, I'm going to put down the
Nobody
website.
took that over then, did they? I haven't seen anything. Stone's
He had killed his wife, his 5-year-old, and himself. And so when people say suicide, there's a little more to it than that. It's also homicide. And this is blowing back. And it's not really a lot of people talking about radicalization. Because he has a friend
kind of,
okay,
when I
but
was
this
in college,
radicalization
you
isn't too much
read
different.
a lot of different sources. You read conservative, liberal, and somewhere out of that, some people. And you're saying, and I think you're probably right, you can't even rely on that.
Yeah, not anymore. Now, this guy uncovered the Iran-Contra affair, and he and his partner, he worked for AP at the time. They fingered Ollie North as the guy, and then he got promoted up to Newsweek, right? So it's a little true story here. So he's invited. He got a Polk Award for his coverage. So he's invited to this little soiree with the president of the chief editor of Newsweek, corporate from New York, this really nice little soiree, about 12 people there, and it was a young representative from Wyoming. It was, and then General Scope Robert and the advisor, Brent. So he's there, and he had just stopped being national security advisor in favor of General Admiral Poindexter. Bob explains about Perry. He's having his, shrimp cocktail, and General Scope out of the blue says, if I were advising Admiral Poindexter going before Congress on Tuesday as to how to reply to the question of how much we told the president, I would say
Oops, you dropped your pen.
He drops his fork on the floor.
Warcraft was supposed to be kind of a good guy, too.
Well, yeah, but this is the way the system works. He drops his phone, he says, without thinking, he says, Joseph, do I understand it?
I think I'm going to go ahead and think my way out of here so I can get outside to a bus stop. And so I'm going to go ahead and take my stream down. But before I do that, I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank any Restream channel that may have picked up my feed and rebroadcasted it, whether it be Global News Network, Activist World News Now, or any of the others that do this. I want to thank you for doing that, and I also want to ask you to donate to my...
Okay.
I'm going to go to a bus stop, take a bus home. Yeah.
Would you like to ride back?
Oh, that would be good, yeah.
I'll stick with this little picture there.
Okay.
Go with Ray and Colleen.
Okay, yeah, that'll work. I'll take that.
Ray. Colleen, I think, is going to...
Yeah, I think she's going a separate way. But anyway, so if you can donate to my...
Yeah, you stick with us.
If you can donate to my GoFundMe site at www.gofundme.com/OccupierKaylin. That's KAYLYNN. Again, www.gofundme.com/OccupierKaylin. Or you can go through PayPal. www.paypal.com, and then to send money to line, enter the email address strainSOP@AOL.com. Again, www.paypal.com, and then to send money to line, enter the email address strainSOP@AOL.com. That will help me cover the cost of my live streaming and broadcasting, so I can continue to bring you these events live. And there will be more in the coming days. So if you cannot donate, please pass them around. Pass my stream URL around so people can see that there is activity here in Des Moines. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you.